you are not going to believe what I'm going to tell you about. And that's fine. I am totally fine with you not believing me, but I do want you to check it out. If you have been building agents and agents that write code for you, you have likely played with Claude Code, Codex Factory, now Perplexity. I mean, there's a whole bunch of options out there. And people have debated, right? Is it this model or this model? Is this model better? And there's constantly changing models. I don't want to talk to you about models. They've talked about, is it this harness or this harness, right? Which one of these players is better? I don't want to talk about harnesses or which of the players are great. I want to introduce you to something completely different. And you may have heard of the Jido Framework. You may have seen me tweeting or posting about it, and you may have gone, what is it? And to tell you that story, I need to back up a little bit, right? Because 6 months ago or 8 months ago, you likely were doing what we've been doing, right? Which is trying to see what can we do and how does it work? And when you get into it, right, you start with something like a Claude Code where you first discovered, right, sub-agents. And so you're saying, hey, build me one of these and build me one of these, and hey, build a JavaScript file that does this, or use this, node library to do this, and you're doing some work. And then at some point you realize that you could say, use as many sub-agents as you can, right? And it would take the work and suddenly create a whole bunch of sub-agents that would all go run all at the same time, working in parallel. And it sped everything up. And you were like, oh, this is a dream. And if you got there, well, let me say it this way. If you've never gotten there, check it out because it's super cool. But if you got there, you'd be like, this is amazing. And it was amazing until a couple different things happened. First, the rights and roles, the responsibilities, the freedom that sub-agent had was not the same as the main task agent, right? So you discovered that it was locked down. Yes, it had its own context space, which was awesome because it wasn't using up the context space of the main guy, but there were things it couldn't do. And so eventually you'd start noticing messages pop up, and then your main task agent would say, I'll just do it myself. And you've gone from parallel to serial, and it slowed down, and you go, oh gosh, that's not fun. Or you'd have to, okay, let me sit here and sit at the computer and hit accept every time do you need rights to do something? So you go, okay, I don't love that, right? I don't love that at all. Maybe you got excited when you heard that you could create skills, right? Because that was, a couple months after that, we were like, oh my God, like summer last year, we were like, oh my God, skills. We can not only create skills, but we can actually attach those skills to some of these sub-task agents. Now, these agents were all generic, right? They were all task agents. They're all generic, but we were able to give these generic sub-task agents specific skills. And then you were able to create agents, right? So you might have even gone further than skills and said, let me define an agent, right? And you'd put it in your .agents folder and put, additional data in there. And you'd be like, let me give you here's how to think, here's how to decide, here are the guardrails for what you do and don't do. Like you can write to this set of files and you can't write to those over there. It was awesome, right? But what you discovered was they don't talk to each other. That these agents would have all this ability to have clarity of who they are, but they were all working independently. And you went, oh, that's a bummer. But then Claude came out with agent teams, and you were like, because they promised these could talk to each other. But when they went back to talking to each other, you discovered that they weren't like the old other agents, right? And so you couldn't give them those constitutions, guardrails, et cetera. You could give them pros, like here's some text that you can give to the LLM to help you think about yourself. But you couldn't lock them in. And they all the agents inherited their rights and privileges from the main head unit. And so they were all the same. They're all identical. And so you're like, gosh, with the old sub-agents, I could shape them, define them, whatever. With this agent team, I can get them to talk to each other, but I can't. And what you're hoping for is the best of both worlds together, right? But you also probably wanted a few other things, right? At least for me, I did. I want to be able to go with, yes, these agents are, communicating with each other and they're able to pass things off, but I also would love if I could schedule some of them, right? And then Claude came out with the schedule feature and you're like, oh, it's getting better, right? So So things have been happening. And if you've been staying current with it all, you know it's changing every day, right? Like we're in the middle of March, and every day this year, I think there's been a new release of something, right? A point release, a dot release, a something, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm trying to keep up with everything. It's a full-time job. But with Jido, this framework for agents, all of a sudden I was like, wait a second. I'm able to get them to talk to each other, but I'm also able to define this agent completely separate from the interaction with the LLM, right? So I can define everything about what it works on, right? The scope of the work it does, what rights it has, the policies that govern what it does, the states that it picks things up and leaves them, in. I can define all of that without ever asking them to, okay, now reason, right? Now get creative. Yes, I can plug in an LLM, and I can plug in any LLM, but I can literally just say, hey, these are all the things you do deterministically, right? Without a need for an LLM and without creativity. And then also, this is when you onboard an LLM. And I can get them to talk to each other, right? Using signals. So they do that. On top of that, I get a supervisor for every set of these guys that are working, right? That will watch and see if something got stalled. And if it does, right, it can go, oh, no problem. And it'll kill it and spin up another one and keep going, right? There is a VM sitting beneath it called the Beam that is monitoring and watching and making sure that in any particular swim lane, if something happens, it doesn't destroy everybody else. And so you're like, okay, this is great, because if something does stall out, I can get it started again. But also, it allows me to hot reload new code. So if I see that something broke here, I can go write some new code to fix that, load it in. Now, I'll still have to restart that guy, but I can pass it to all the other guys and say, hey, the next time you run at something, right, I don't have to reboot the system. I don't have to do anything else. Just pick up the new version and keep going. And you're like, this is too good to be true, right? Because I'm defining these agents as full agents that aren't creative. I can define everything about how they do straight transitions, how they do delegation, what policies govern what they do, and all of that. I can then turn around and test all of them so much better, right? Because I can say, okay, imagine that you're in this state, you get this input, right? And then go look at what comes out the other end. And that's normal programming. That's not anything fancy, except you can't do that when your agents are only LLM, right? When your agent is completely LLM, you can't do anything but hope that what you passed as a system prompt, or hope that what you passed as a regular prompt, user prompt, that it's going to do the thing you want to do. And trust me, if you've been playing in that space, you know that we test over and over and over. And each time you're like, well, it's, the LLMs are mostly probabilistic. I mean, you're mostly going to get in the right realm. But here I go, no, I'm defining the actions, and I'm defining the states, and I'm defining every agent, and I'm defining all the signal routing, right? Who's listening to what and how they get that information. I get to define all of that. And I didn't come upon this because I was trying to build or work on another code generation platform. I didn't care about code generation. What I cared about was putting these agents to work in the product, not to build the product. But as I discovered them for that, I backed up and said, I wonder if these guys can actually code the product too. And that's what I've been playing with. And I have a whole separate video that shows you how they're generating code for me and what they're doing. So that's another one. But I just wanted to tell you a little about Jido, Jido, and what it's up to, because it's incredibly powerful. It lets you use any LLM. And it's the real deal. You're gonna use other tools. I'm not questioning that. But at some point you're going to get to but I can't do this, or I can't do that. You're gonna hit one of those, and then you're just gonna either sit and wait for someone like Anthropic or someone like OpenAI to open up that feature, or you're going to have to back all the way up and start from first principles. And that's why I think you ought to check out the Jido Framework and Elixir and the Beam, because I think you're going to go, wow, this is doing it all already. Jido 2.0 just came out, and my agents, right, that sit on my computer and let me go, okay, wake up, guys, go to town, they're fantastic.